have talks from Wayne Myrvold on the status of quantum state realism, then Angelobassi on present and future precision tests of spontaneous wave function collapse models. And stay after these two sessions because we will have a roundtable about varieties of realism in quantum physics. So I won't chair this roundtable, but this is not the end of the two talks. So we will start with Wayne, who will talk about the status of quantum state realism. So just a reminder. So it's around 45-50 minutes of presentation, then around 25 minutes of discussion, and we hope to have around 10 minutes of break. Wayne, if you need me for the timing, or if you have any question, please ask.
Yeah, I'll keep track, but if I do like go over, then just shoot a flare or something like that. I'll try to keep within the 45 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. It's yours.
Okay, all right. Okay, you're seeing my screen, yes? We good? All right, so title I gave Christian was on the status of quantum state realism. And at the time, I didn't know what Owen was going to be talking about, but I'm very pleased to see that my talk that I planned ends up being a pretty good follow-up to what Owen was talking about the other day. So those who are familiar with, who are here for Owen's talk, I think of this as a sort of follow-up, and I'm going to address one aspect of the broader issue that was Owen was talking about. But I just want to say I pretty much agree with what Owen was saying, and I think that this is very much in the spirit. So the title, sort of bland title I gave Christian was this, on the status of quantum state realism. The more provocative title is Subjectivists about quantum probability should be realists about quantum states, because there's very often there seems to be a suggestion that if you're a subjectivist about probabilities, like this automatically means that you're not a realist about quantum states. And this is based on 3 papers that appeared fairly recently, 2 in collected volumes, and a little spin-off paper with some of the technical details I didn't want to burden the philosophers with in Phys Rev A. And I think that Chris Fuchs is in the audience today. Good, because at a certain point, I'm going to be saying, well, here's what I think Chris will be saying to this sort of thing. And I'd absolutely like to get his reaction to what I'm saying. So whether I'm interpreting him right or not. Okay, so let's get going. Okay, so first of all, I just want to make clear what question is I'm addressing. The question I'm interested in this talk, and it's the question that's motivated most of my work having to do with foundations or philosophy of quantum mechanics, is what, if anything at all, does the empirical success of quantum theory tell us about the world? And Owen was suggesting that we have fairly robust reasons to think that no matter what changes in physical theory we're going to have in the future, and of course we're expecting them, that the basic conclusions that distinctions between pure quantum states correspond to actual physical distinctions are based on considerations that are sufficiently robust that we can reasonably expect them to hold even under course of theory change. So what I'm not doing is asking, what is the world like under the fiction that quantum mechanics is exactly correct? I don't regard that as a particularly interesting question. So what I'm not addressing is a different question about whether QGism gives rise to a research program that's a fruitful source of conjectures in interesting research problems, et cetera. Because this latter kind of consideration is very often among the reasons given by cubists for adopting cubism, and answer, everything I'm going to say is going to be compatible with a yes answer to that, the second question. But I think that that's a very different question from the question of what we should actually believe about the world. And we can talk more about that later if you like. Okay, so what I want to argue is these psi ontology results of the sort that Owen was talking about the other day. The Pbr theorem is something that a lot of people know about it. There are other theorems. In particular, I find this BCLM theorem very interesting and important. They go through if all the probabilities invoked in them are taken to be subjective probabilities. So every time you see a probability mentioned, take that to be the credence of some particular agent, as long as you modify the conclusion. The conclusion is going to be about the agent's credences. So the credence is just a word for that people use for beliefs or degrees of belief, if that's unfamiliar terminology for you. Okay, so an agent whose credences about outcomes of experiments can be represented by quantum states should believe that preparation procedures with which she associates distinct pure quantum states produce distinct physical states. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about what I mean by all that. Okay, so I want to step back and talk about some considerations we bring to our dealings with the world, which I regard as relatively theory independent, the sort of things that we tend to assume about the world in our dealings of the world prior to constructing physical theories. Now, it is, of course, always possible that we have presuppositions about the way the world works, and the progress of science leads us to conclude, okay, we were mistaken about those, gives us reason to rethink them. But everything I'm going to be saying is things that I claim are not things that anything that we have learned in the 20th century or the 21st century so far gives us any reason to question whatsoever. So, a lot of, there's been a lot of work in quantum information theory about communication protocols, and I want to talk about, very basic format of a communication program. So Alice has a message she wants to convey, either to another agent or to her own future self. So she could, for example, be attending a physics talk and be taking notes on some laptop. So she wants to remember what she wrote earlier. In order for this to be informative, there have to be different choices. Like if there's only one thing that possibility of a choice, there's nothing to remember about. So that has to be all alternative messages you can choose between. Oops. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't know there was a key that you could accidentally hit, which would take you to the end of the slideshow. I just learned something. I have no idea what key that is, but apparently I just hit it. Anyways, okay. And so you've got some physical system in which you can perform alternative operations. So again, just think of a running example, someone taking notes on a laptop. Some association between the message and operation performed. She makes her choice, performs an operation, passes the system to Bob, or hit send on an email, doesn't matter. So she could hand the laptop to Bob or hit send on an email, doesn't matter. Who performs a readout operation, which has a number of perceptually distinguishable possible outcomes. Okay, no physical theory so far. Some basic presuppositions. And upon readout Bob, or this could be Alice's later self being reminded of her because she's forgetful about what she had her choices she had made the other day. Okay, so how do we understand this? You've got these agents going through this sort of ritual. Why do they do this? Well, And I noticed, Alice regards some physical systems as more suitable for this purpose as others. And I think this tends to be true of physicists, including qubits, who are taking notes. I've noticed it's much more common for people to be taking notes on a laptop rather than a kumquat, for example. Right. So our agent regards some physical systems as more suitable. Well, what's the difference? I think it's fair to assume that if you're going through this sort of ritual, that Alice and Bob both believe that Alice's choice of operation has an effect on the physical state of the system used, which in turn has an effect on the result of Bob's readout. That's how it can be possible that what Bob sees upon readout is informative about Alice's choices, or what Alice sees when she looks at her screen the next day can be informative about what choices of keystrokes she made the day before. They could be wrong about this. And so at no point in the argument, I'm going to assume the correctness of the agent's credences. And I think we've all had this sort of experience that you're typing away and you think that you are having an effect on your computer that's going to be permanent, and that you're going to be able to learn later about what effects you had on the computer, and you have a hard disk crash, and your assumption about what's the causal link between your actions today and readouts tomorrow gets broken. So no assumption whatsoever about the correctness about these agents' credences. Because the conclusion is going to be about their credences. Right. Okay, now suppose we started to make a physical theory about the sorts of systems that Alice and Bob are using. So I'm not assuming classical physics, I'm not assuming quantum physics, I'm just saying, if you've got a situation like this, what sort of physical theory might you construct? Okay. If you believe, so a claim is, if you believe that the device can serve as a mean of discriminating with the certainty between two input operations, you should believe that the set of physical states that can result from those two things have no overlap. If you in fact believe that the preparation procedure and readout are mediated by effects on the physical state of things. And just in jargon that I'm going to be introducing in a moment, you should believe that readout distinguishable preparations have ontically distinct effects. Again, there's nothing at all particularly classical or quantum about this. I think this is the sort of considerations we bring to the table when we're starting to construct a physical theory. Okay, so getting a little bit formal. Some of you are going to be familiar with the sort of apparatus I'm going to introduce. It's based on the ontological, what Harrigan and Speckens called the ontological model framework. And I think what they're doing there is basically formalizing modes of reasoning that were taking implicitly taken for granted in a lot of stuff before they ever did it, including a lot of physical theorizing. Okay, so assume that Alice consider and have credences conditional on various theories about a setup of the sort. So she starts constructing theories, and there's some set of theories that she can think about and consider. Any such physical theory will involve some set of possible physical states. And assume that she has outcome credences conditional on a given theory. Meaning that conditional on the theory, she has a credence that conditional on the theory and the assumption of a certain preparation act, that a certain readout will obtain. So I'm not assuming that these are 1 or 0 or even close to it. She might think that on a given conditional on a given theory and a given preparation, there's her credence might be actually equally divided between various outcomes. Okay. I'm assuming that conditional on a theory T, she has credence in the possible readout outcomes conditional on the supposition that the physical state of the system is that state for any state in the theory praise. So if she's considering a theory and says, okay, on the supposition this theory is true and the state is omega, conditional credence is about various outcomes. Right? And so that's just notation for that. Okay. Now the assumption that that Alice believes that the effect of her choice of preparation on the outcome is mediated by its effect on the state of the device is a screening off assumption. That if I specify if the theory T and the state of the system, then her credence in then it doesn't matter what the preparation was once you've specified that. So if the two preparations that result in the same physical state, conditional on that being the physical state, same credence in various outcomes. That's a screening off condition. It's the condition that according to, she believes that if theory T is true, then the effect of preparation X on readouts is mediated by effect on the state of the device. Okay. I assume she's got credence as conditional on T about the states resulting from a given preparation act. So giving preparation act could possibly result in a number of different physical states, and so conditional on the theory T and a given preparation act, there's a credence distribution about over suitable subsets of the theory state. And we're assuming that her act outcome credences meshes with her credences about the intermediate states. So credence of getting a certain result conditional on theory T in preparation phi is just an average over the possible mediating states of these conditional credences, where this expectation, the average is taken with respect to those credences mentioned in point 4, that about what state that is produced by preparation phi. So these are the assumptions I'm going to make about Alice's credences. Again, quantum mechanics, classical mechanics, nothing of this has been mentioned. Among the theory T's might be quantum theories, classical theories, things no one's ever heard of. Okay, so I just want to make clear is all of these things are in fact Alice's credences. There is no suggestion whatsoever that the theory determines what these are or constrains them in any way whatsoever. And this is an important point because a number of years ago, I was at a conference in the PI, and Rudiger Schack was in the audience. I was talking about these things, and he said, well, we cubists don't assume that there's a physical state that determines the probabilities of outcomes conditional on that state. And I said, well, that is not an assumption. These are the agent's conditional credences. So there's no such assumption at all in this. Okay. Okay, so definition, she takes X to be readout distinguishable on a theory T if for for every outcome R, she has credence 0 in one or in that outcome conditional on one or the other of the acts. She takes the effects of acts to be ontically distinct if there's no overlap in the sets that she believes can sets of states that she believes can result from those preparations. And of course, that's the sort of thing that comes in degrees. So we can talk about the extent of the overlap and the theory, the BCLM theorem that I mentioned earlier and that Owen mentioned in his talk is about possible, extensive such overlaps. Okay. And then fairly straightforward. In fact, it seemed a little pompous to even call this a theorem. It follows that if Alice's credences satisfy the conditions that I had on the previous slides, then if Alice regards two acts to be readout distinguishable on theory T, she takes their effects to be ontically distinct on theory T. And this is just, a sort of test that this formalism does indeed capture the assumptions that we make. I mean, I think that most of us do think that if I can tell tomorrow with certainty whether I, wrote one thing or another on my computer today, then there are distinct states, internal states of the computer corresponding to different choices of what I write today. So that's basically what that says. Okay. Terminology, Alice takes a theory to be psiontic, and I am here, of course, using Harrigan and Speckin's terminology. If she takes every pair of preparations which she asserts distinct pure quantum states to be ontically distinct. Actually, did I? Okay, these are in wrong order because I have to talk about Alice associating quantum states. So the quantum Bayesian states is that constraint is agents act outcome credences should be representable by some quantum state. So they should be if you have certain degree credences about outcomes of some experiment given some preparation procedure, there should be some quantum state that yields those credences via the Born rule. So you shouldn't have credences that can't possibly be represented by a quantum state. So that's a restriction on what kind of credences you can have. Of course, it leaves an awful lot open. So I think that's one of the basic tenets of cubism, right? And also assume that for any quantum state, there is some combination of preparation and experiments, such Alice's credences about results of the experiment, given the preparation is representable by that state. Which preparations or experiments those are, that's totally up to Alice. I'm not assuming that there's something that constrains Alice's credences to associate this or that quantum state with a given preparation. That's up to her. Okay, so given that constraint, I'll say that she takes a theory to be psiontic if she takes every pair of preparations with which she associates distinct pure quantum states to be ontically distinct. And that leaves open a lot of possibilities of, well, what sort of beliefs she might have about what sort of things the physical states are. And I'm going to come back to that later. Okay, so suppose there's two preparation acts such that Alice's credences by the results of subsequent experiments are represented by orthogonal quantum states. Then from what we already said, conditional on any theory or set of theories for which her conditional credences satisfy those constraints that I had, she takes the preparation acts to be ontically distinct. And that means her credence that those preparation acts have ontically distinct effects should be at least as high as her total credence in that set of in that set of theories. Okay. So just going back, I was making some changes to the slide yesterday, and I did believe that distinct choices credences that I made yesterday. I'm sorry, this is back. I didn't fix this. I should say distinct choices of keystrokes made on Tuesday result in distinct internal states in my computer, and what's displayed on Wednesday is informative of the choices I made on Tuesday via their effect on the internal state of the computer. And I could be wrong about this, right? But that doesn't matter, because the conclusions we're going to have are about what a given agent should believe given some other beliefs they have. Right. But if I became convinced that my choices of keystrokes make no difference to the internal state of the computer, I would also revise my belief that what is displayed on the next day is informative about those choices. Right. Okay. So the argument so far is that Alice should take preparations with which she associates preparations with which she associates orthogonal quantum states, meaning those are the quantum states that represent her credences about outcomes of experiments. She should take those to have ontically distinct effects. And this is already we've already gone beyond what, if I understand them correctly, what cubists are going to follow. But the question then arises: well, what about non-orthogonal states? Because those aren't in fact distinguishable, and that's what the Pbr theorem is about. So they introduce a further constraint on these theories called the preparation independence postulate. It's the assumption that given a pair of systems and a pair of pure quantum states, there is a preparation procedure corresponding to that product state that yields an ontic state of the pair in the Cartesian product system and a probability distribution on which the states of the two systems are probabilistically dependent. The only assumption is that it's possible to prepare such things in such a way to screens off correlations. It's not assumed that every preparation procedure that we associate with that product state does, that it is possible to do that. It has two parts. Cartesian product system is that there are states in that in the state space of the combined system corresponding to states in the Cartesian product of the state spaces of the individual systems. No assumption whatsoever that exhausts all the possible states of the composite system, and the sort of no correlation assumption. So they introduce so that is a condition on the state space of the system. And I'm interested in and it's satisfied by quantum mechanics, but I'm interested, as I said at the beginning, in the question of what we should be taking, permanent take-home messages, not just on the assumption that quantum mechanics is exactly right. And I worry about whether that Cartesian product assumption would actually be satisfied in successor theories. So I was interested in coming up with a version of the theory that does away with that. Okay, and so that's what that's what's in that little PRA paper that I mentioned. Okay, so Pbr theorem is for any theory that specifies the preparation independence postulate. Preparations associated with distinct pure quantum states are ontically distinct. Okay, so just want to make clear, because I think people, when I talk to people, I find that sometimes they misunderstand things like this. Other than the Cartesian product assumption, there's no assumption at all about the structure of the state space. So sometimes people think that the ontological models framework is a hidden variables framework or something like that. Usually hidden variables means that there are extra structure beyond quantum states. There is no such assumption. The theory could be one in which the ontology is nothing but quantum states. No assumption of whatever you think a distinction between classical and non-classical theories is. There is no assumption of classicality. Richard Healy makes a remark in one of his papers that suggests that this framework doesn't apply to his pragmatist view. He says, magnitudes are not always well defined, so there's no ontic state space in which even one of them always has a precise value. Well, that is not an assumption, that any magnitude you sometimes assign a value to always has a value. For the purpose of the theorem, a state specification could be the sort of thing that Healy is imagining, just a list of statements of the form that Q is in a given set for those Q for which is this true. And that can vary from state to state. And the ontic state space could be just it's a set of lists of such statements. I think I don't entirely understand Carlo's relational quantum mechanics, but insofar as I do, I think that everything's fine according to that view. A state specification could be relative states, relative. So remember, in the setup, we're talking about experimental apparatus preparation and readout. So if you say that things only have states relative to other systems with interact, then let the states we'll be talking about be states relative to those systems, and I think everything is fine. They could also be branch relative states if you're a Everettian. Okay. So in terms of credences, suppose that for any quantum state, there's a preparation such that Alice's credences about the outcome of experiments match the probabilities yielded by that state. Then for any theory such that Alice's state space for a pair of systems includes product states, and Alice's credences about the results of independent preparations of distinct states are concentrated on that Cartesian product with probabilistic independence of the components. Then under the assumptions, the other assumptions that I had on the previous slide, Alice must regard the effects of those preparations. Sorry, I didn't mean to say the effects of the quantum states. The effects of those preparations, which we associate distinct quantum states as ontically distinct on the assumption of theory T. Okay. Therefore, her credence that any pairs of quantum states are ontically distinct should be at least as high as her net credence in the class of all such theories. Okay, so I mentioned this before. I was interested in not making the Cartesian product assumption. And in the papers mentioned, I introduced what I call the preparation uninformative condition. For this condition, for interest in time, I'm not going to say what that is because I want to get to other things, but we can talk about it in the discussion if you like. It's a strictly weaker condition than the preparation independence postulate. And unfortunately, I got a weaker conclusion. I only got ontic distinctness for states that aren't too close to each other. I don't know whether the theorem can be extended without bringing in any extra conditions, I guess wasn't to arbitrary distinct quantum states, I guess wasn't able to do it. Okay, so conclusions of these theorems, that given certain constraints on Alice's credences, is that she should take pure quantum states to correspond to distinctions in physical reality. As Owen was saying, that leaves open the question of what sort of distinctions in physical reality correspond to distinct quantum states. There's no assumption that it's anything like found in quantum physics. Also, for those of you who like to draw a distinction between the ontology of a theory between primitive ontology and other stuff, there's no assumption about what is on the primitive ontology or what is sophisticated ontology. So if you've got something like the Bohm theory and you think that the particle position, particles are the primitive ontology, and the quantum state is in the non-primitive ontology, that's fine. Right? You're a quantum state realist in the sense that it is being used here. And if you say, well, what the quantum state is something more like a physical law than stuff, that's also fine. Because if you think that different quantum states different preparations have an effect on what law it is that's going to subsequently influence the particle positions, that's a real physical distinction. And that is a quantum state realist position in the sense relevant to these theorems. So the Bohm theory on any interpretation is, or de Broglie-Bohm pilot wave theory on any interpretation is quantum state realist in the sense relevant. Okay, how do cubists respond? Well, my experience talking to Chris and Rudiger about these things, and this is probably in print somewhere, is to resist the first step, is the conclusion that they should take distinct real preparation to actually have honestly distinct effects. And so I wanted to talk about that, spend the last few minutes. Question for Chris, since you're here. Do you believe that when you're writing an email or taking notes for your own future use on laptops, that distinct choices of keystrokes, usually, sometimes things break down, result in distinct physically distinct internal states of the laptop that you later find out? Or is there one set of rules dealing with everyday life, another one when you put on your cubist hat? I don't think that that's right. Okay, so one thing I want to emphasize is that nothing in the argument I'm given has contradicted or
you misspelled cubism. Wayne, you misspelled cubism. It should have a capital B.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, damn autocorrect that did that. Did I have it right? So yeah, yeah. I hate that because autocorrect wants to turn those things into into things that they think have correct capitalization, and if you don't catch it, it can be. So thank you for that. I will fix it. Yeah. Right. So in the literature, there's various lists of fundamental principles or fundamental tenets of cubism. Let me just talk about one of, I think that everything I say is compatible with everything with the official view. So this is from Chris's Notwithstanding Bohr. The Born rule is a normative statement. Well, the only place anything that the Born rule came in was on that slide where I was talking about constraints on Alice's credences. Yeah, nowhere else. In fact, that's the only place where quantum considerations came in at all. all probabilities, including all quantum probabilities, are so subjective they never tell nature what to do. And this, if people are wondering, this is why I emphasize several points that if I have certain credences about the effects of my acts on a system, they can be wrong. And sometimes they are wrong. My credences do not tell nature what to do. I wish they did, because then I'd never be wrong about anything. Right. Quantum measured outcomes just our personal experiences or the agent gambling on them. And nothing at all in the argument relied on whether we were taking the measurement outcomes to be stuff that display physical states of my computer monitor or experiences of the agent. So as long as the agent can perceptually distinguish between what we're calling distinct outcomes, and of course, if the outcomes are just distinct, experiences, then that's fine. So everything that I've said so far is compatible with these three fundamental tenets of cubism. And if you look at other lists of fundamental principles of cubism, the same holds. So if you do reject ontic distinctness of distinctual preparations, one thing you could do is you reject the idea that there's a causal relation between your choice of preparations acts today and your experience of results of readout operations tomorrow that is mediated by effects on the physical state of the device. One way to do it, it would be say, well, they're still retain talk of causal connections between events, but just maintain there's a direct causal link between your present actions and future experience, unmediated by an effect on the external world. Or you could take a more radical rule and reject all talk of causal links between my present actions and future experiences. I'm sorry. There's too many typos on these slides. I should say future experiences, sorry. And there are so this is, I want to know what Chris thinks. There are passages in his writings that suggest B. Here's from that 2017 paper that I mentioned earlier called Notwithstanding War, The Reasons for Cubism. There's a sense in which this unhinging of the Born rule from being a law of nature in the usual conception makes the cubist notion of quantum indeterminism a far more radical variety than anything proposed in the quantum debate before. It says in the end that nature does what it wants without a mechanism underneath, or indeed any conception that would diminish the autonomy of nature's events. Nature's in its parts do what they want, and we as free-willed agents do what we can get away with. Quantum theory on this account is our best means yet for hitching a ride with the universe's pervasive creativity and doing what we can to contribute to it. Okay, so that's a certain picture of the way the world is. And what I want to know, is there any reason to believe it? Yeah. And I think that what sorts of physical laws nature does or doesn't conform to is not something that can be known a priori. Through the history of philosophy, a lot of philosophers talked as if they thought that determinism in laws of nature is something that we could know a priori, and I don't think that's right. So one option is determinism. One option is some kind of chancy physical laws, like in these dynamical collapse theories. And another option is a sort of more radical, very radical indeterminism that Chris is talking about, where there's there's not only no deterministic physical laws, but there's not even chancy physical laws. So, if someone posits a theory according to which there are objective chances or something else that would lead one to expect certain statistical regularities, that theory can be put to empirical test according to usual Bayesian methods. So you do frequency experiments and see if the frequencies conform to the chances that the theory predicts. And I suppose that persistence to failure to find regularities of that sort might support the idea that no theory like that is true. But I think we find ourselves in exactly the opposite situation. I do not think that the sort of radical determinism that Chris is talking about is supported by experimental evidence. Okay, so I'm going to end there. And if I may be permitted, I just want to mention, I got a book that came out about a month ago, and it's got nothing to do with quantum mechanics except the last chapter, but it does have a lot to do with the role of probabilities in science. And just like to let you know that it is available if you want. Okay, so I think I came close to the allowed time limit.
Yeah. It's perfect. Thank you very much. You can applaud. So if you have questions, please put your name in the conversation, and I don't know, Christian or I will try to gather them. Maybe try to ask not too long questions. Try to keep it short. And yeah, so we have, and maybe also, Chris, if you want to reply to some things, Chris Fuchs, you can do it too. So we have a question from Cyril. Cyril, you can talk.
Yeah, can you hear me? Thanks for the nice talk. You are very mysterious about this new preparation uninformativeness condition. Can you say more about it?
Yes. Yes. So I gave a longer talk version of this talk a couple of weeks ago, and just cut that part out for the interest of keeping in the time limit. Okay, so the basic thing is, idea is it captures one feature of this probabilistic independence probabilistic independence is captured by the PIP. So here's the situation. So suppose you've got a pair of systems and you've got choices of preparation procedures on the system, and but you don't know which so you've got a choice of two preparation procedures on each half, and and you start out with prior credences about which preparation procedures there are. So maybe you think that each one of them is chosen with probability 1/2, right? Okay, now suppose now I give you the exact physical ontic state of the system, and you conditionalize on that. That will be informative usually about which preparation pairs of preparations are done. So you have credences conditional on the ontic state about which preparations are done. And then, suppose now, so here's the independence condition. So suppose now I tell you what preparation is done on one system, conditionalize on that. Does that change your credence about the preparation done on this one? And the preparation uninformative condition is the condition that it's not. So it's entailed by the preparation independence condition. So if we have this preparation independence condition, then yeah, if I give you the ontic state, and so you form credences about the two preparations, then your credences about those preparations are going to be independent, and telling you about one isn't going to stay. So it's entailed by the usual PIP, but the difference is it didn't include the Cartesian product assumption.
Okay, thanks.
Now we have a question from Chris Timpson.
Thanks, Wayne. So I'm wondering whether there's some connection between how you're pressing the cubist's case and something I called the quantum Bayesian Morse paradox a while ago. So my quantum Bayesian Morse paradox was that it seems like cubists should be committed to the claim that I'm certain that P, but it's not certain that P. So that the first bit expresses their assignment of a pure quantum state to something. The second bit expresses their meta-theoretical commitment about the nature of such statements. is there a connection there between the ideas?
Okay, yeah. So that second sentence that you said, which you gave as a gloss on this, quantum Moore's prior act, I think is pretty much exactly the same that I'm, I think about it, that, So yeah. So the answer is yes.
Okay, good.
There is a connection, and I think I think that when wrestling, both you and I have been thinking about this, about QBism for some time, and it's no surprise that we've had similar thoughts. Yeah.
No, indeed. And when saying that the qubits needs to be committed, or it seems like they're committed to at least some distinction in physical reality, do they need to be committed to a distinction, or to that distinction being anything more than to whatever their beliefs supervene on? So it might be that, yeah, there's something which makes it the case that I got such and such a belief. If I had a different belief, there'd be something else which makes it the case, perhaps fairly internal to me, which makes it the case that I've got that other belief. Okay. So the differences in physical reality might just be expressed by whatever it is that my belief supervenes on, and nothing.
Right. In that case, it's literally true that quantum states are in the head, right? I guess that would be a version of that, but I was thinking, well, okay, I was taking the physical system that Alice is entertaining. Okay, I was assuming implicitly, and I didn't realize till this moment there was an implicit assumption. So now let me make it explicit. I was assuming that these physical theories that Alice is entertaining are theories about some system which is distinct from her own brain or whatever it is that her credences supervene on. Because after all, Alice is using this external system as a mediating device. Now, if you allow the theories to be theories about things including her own brain state or whatever it is, then that kind of trivializes it, right? Yes. So for the purposes of this argument, I am more interested in cases where the theories T that you're entertaining are theories about the physical state of some apparatus or other system that you're acting on, and not about whatever it is physically in your brain that your beliefs supervene on.
Okay, great, thanks. That's really helpful.
Okay, a question from Carl Hofer.
Yeah. Hi, Wayne. Thanks. That
Hi.
was very nice.
Good to see you.
Yeah. I wanted to ask a question about your assumption 3, which is a kind of a screening off condition about the Preparation Act. And
Yeah.
because that's, when I was listening to your talk, and it's kind of the second time I hear something like this talk, that's what leaped out to me as something that you might imagine a qubist would deny or say, no, that's not something I assume. And so the question I have is if, and this may be very closely connected to this option B that you mentioned towards the end of your talk, for how to avoid the conclusion. But what I wanted to ask is whether you could maintain something like the PBR argument, but just branching it into 2 cases. One where you assume that there is something, some kind of physical state that's intermediate between the preparation and the later readout, and one in which you don't assume that you explicitly assume there is no such thing as a physical state that's intermediate, and then try to show something relevantly useful on that branch.
Okay, that's a very good question. I think that the answer is on that second option that you don't get anything useful. That theorems of this sort crucially do depend on this sort of screening off condition. That put it this way: one option is that somehow or another, my decisions today have a direct causal link, a direct causal link on things that happen, what I experience tomorrow, that's not mediated by effects on the physical system. Okay, if that's it, then that just leaves what, if anything, happens to the physical system completely open. I can come to no conclusions whatsoever about the effects of my acts on that physical system. So I do think that that screening off condition could be weakened. So all of these things involve inequalities, so they're robust under certain. You can weaken the things a lot. So you can say that conditional on omega, changing the preparation doesn't change the probability of outcomes very much, right? So you can weaken it to partial screening off, and something I actually that's a good question. I've never sat down and do it. Is how much we can, how much can you push it before the theorem breaks? But I don't think you can get away with anything without anything at all like it. And
May I correspond? May I respond to Carl at the same time as answering one of Wayne's questions? Is that okay with you, Wayne?
That's great. Yeah.
Could you put up your slide that says Alice's assumptions, part 2?
Okay, yeah.
There you. Isn't there one more line?
Okay, yes. Okay, all right. Yes.
There we go. So I would say what cubists reject is number 5.
Okay.
So the idea that the probabilities for the outcomes of a quantum measurement could be expressed as, you write here, the expectation of the credence of something with respect to the ontic variable omega.
Right.
So I would call that an instance of the law of total probability. And I would say if omega is something experienceable in a laboratory, if it is experienceable, then it must conform to the notion of something that can be given by a quantum measurement outcome.
Mm-hmm.
If you make that assumption, the Born rule cannot be massaged into that form.
Okay.
So that is my basic disagreement with the theorem.
Okay.
And then we could get into all the philosophy, which I don't want to do now. But I will pinpoint that it is point number 5 that I disagree with.
Okay, good. This is right. Right. And okay, if I'm understanding what you just said, then you actually get off the boat also at point 4, because that's assuming you have credences about what the conditional on a preparation about what the physical state is. And if I'm understanding you correctly, if those physical states aren't something experienceable, you shouldn't have credences about them. Is that right?
Well, that's a more general philosophical point, which I think I would agree with.
Right.
I would say that in the long road toward cubism, I was pushed in that direction. I didn't start with that assumption. But I think number 5 is more relevant. I would say I jump off the boat at the very beginning when the first real equation is introduced. So therefore, things like what Carl brought up, further conditions, I'm already off the boat right now.
Okay, so all right, okay, this is interesting. So you're fine with everything 1 through 4.
I would have to go back and study 1 through 4.
Okay, so I mean, here's what I think. So I'm imagining, so 4 actually, I just want to make clear what sort of assumption is. I am assuming that the agent has credences about what, conditional on a theory T about states that result from a preparation act whether or not though the statements about what state is in are testable or can by experience. So, I'm assuming that question number 4 is in fact the assumption that I can have credences about things that aren't directly observable or directly experienceable by me. Yeah. So, that is a strong assumption. I think it's perfectly reasonable, but we can talk about that.
But you see, I would reorder these. I would say, because I reject 5,
Right.
I've come to reject 4.
Okay, all right. This is good. The reason they have to be in order is that equation 5 makes no sense unless 4 it holds. Like
that is a species of it. Yes, I agree with you. I agree.
Right. So the expectation value invoked in 5 is expectation value with respect to these credence distributions assumed in 4. Good.
Okay, that's all I've got to say. I don't want to interrupt the whole conversation.
Okay. All right. Okay. But I think, right. But again, these, I mean, maybe we'll have a chance to talk more in the roundtable label. But these assumptions are used to extend from ontic distinction of distinguishable states to ontic distinction distinctness of non-orthogonal pure quantum states. But if I understand you correctly, you already want to get off on the boat on the earlier part. You don't want to say that orthogonal quantum states correspond to ontically distinct states of affairs, unless I'm misunderstanding.
No, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So
okay.
Let's continue. We have 2 more questions, so maybe we can try to keep it as short as possible because we have 5 minutes left for a question. So next we have Anthony Valentino.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, Wayne. Yeah, so I'll try to be quick. Just two quick questions, really. I mean, you'd made a comment about the PBR, and I think you're in reference to relational quantum mechanics. Mm-hmm. You could regard the state as relative to the apparatus or something. But I just wanted to just ask you quickly. I mean, as I understand it, the Pbr theorem also assumes that an isolated system has an ontic state, which presumably would not be true in relational quantum mechanics, right?
So Carlo could probably answer that to me. Carlo can probably answer that better than I can, but I'm taking it that, okay, here we've got the system and we've interacted it with via some preparation procedure we've done some of the preparation procedure, and as the result of that, as a result of that interaction, the quantum state has the system has some quantum state relative to that apparatus, so relative to that other system that's interacted with. So I don't know if Carlo's here or not. He can tell me whether that's right or not.
Well, I mean, maybe we could talk about that in the round table, but there's just one other quick question. I mean, you'd mentioned something about the, in de Broglie-Bohm theory, this idea that the wave function could be gnomic or like a law. Right. And you said you thought that could still fit because I think you said something about how the law governing a system could be affected by the preparation.
Right.
Is that correct? That doesn't, I mean, I have to like to think about this a bit more, but it doesn't sound right. I mean, if I think about, just saying classical physics, I can, prepare a system in a way I think, well, I can change its Hamiltonian. by preparing it differently.
Right.
Normally that would involve, well, you know, I switched on an external electric field or something like that, which, you know, and the fact that we can affect those things by preparation makes us think that they are ontological. There's something called the electric field, there's an external potential. I'm not really changing the laws.
Right. Okay. So, yeah. So, I mean, they use this phrase gnomic, and they say it's kind of like a law in classical mechanics, and you know, it's an analogy, and the analogy isn't perfect, of course. But what they mean here, what they mean when they say that the quantum state is gnomic is its role in the theory is, you know, as a guiding wave to govern govern the motion of the particles. And there's a matter of fact, according to them, about what the psi for the bit whole universe is. And also in situations where we get to attribute a quantum state to a subsystem of the universe where it has an effective wave function, there's a matter of fact about what that effective wave function is.
Right. But I mean,
and our choices of what things, you know, right. So our choices of what preparations to do has an effect on what the effective wave function of the subsystem we're dealing with is. And those are real physical distinctions between for
yes, I mean, I
guys.
understand all that. I just don't see how this can fit with a gnomic view.
So the people who use the language gnomic view, right, are committed to there being a real physical distinction. They are committed to there being a matter of fact about what the effective wave function of a quantum system is when it has one, and that our choice of preparations can make a difference to that. Okay. So they are it is so maybe it's compatible with the commitments of the people who use that language. Now, if you want to say, well, gee, that means that the wave function isn't really gnomic, fine. Right, okay. But yeah, right. Okay. But then it just comes to okay. Okay. I actually think that the distinction between ontic and gnomic is an ill-posed one. I think that what it means for there to be a table there is to say that in this region of space is to say that, you know, this region of space interacts with other things in particular ways. So it's completely dispositional and gnomic.
I mean, I thought the essential distinction between gnomic and non-gnomic is basically about contingency. The law is something that is a constraint that's just always there. Whereas, you know, there's no reason to say that that table had to be there. It could have been in the other corner of the room. There's nothing in the laws of physics that I think,
I don't remember. I think that these people who adopt that terminology think that the wave function of the universe is contingent. It could be different. Yeah.
Well, they tend to go, the papers I've seen by Dourdent and co. They make claims about there being a unique solution to the Wheeler-DeWitt equation.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. You know, it's been a long time since I've read those things. Okay.
So it sounds as if we're agreeing, but maybe it's just.
I have more to say because it has to do, but it's not going to be short, so I'm not going to say it now. Right.
Well, maybe for the round table we can.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
You can keep it for the round table. We will take a last question from Aurélien. Aurélien Drezet.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, my question is really related to what was discussed just now by Anthony and Wayne. So there's no too much problem for that. So my question is related really to the fact that in a gnomic view, if you use Bohmian mechanics or the Broglie-Bohm theory, is not playing any role in the Pbr theorem in my way of thinking about it, because as you say, Anthony, if you could think about the law of the system as independent of some other the statistical preparation, like that is as we think about it in statistical mechanics, you could imagine that the law are somehow independent of the wave function, but this is not the case in the case of Bayesian mechanics or the broad-form theory, because if you change the Pbr theorem is relying definitely on this assumption. If you remove this assumption and the conditional probability for any outcome, depending on the hidden variable, is independent of the wave function, then it doesn't work. So, for example, the case that is used, that was used in the discussion to say that the wave function is the ontic state, and then everything is fine, and you don't need an hidden variable. It is okay. This is fine because then everything is depending on the wave function. But for the broad-form theory, it's really important to remember that all the probability, all the conditional probability are depending on the wave function. So you change.
This is really important. I think that, so the question is, what is the ontic state space on the de Broglie-Bohm theory?
Mm-hmm.
To specify the ontic state of something on the de Broglie-Bohm theory, you have to specify both the particle positions and the wave function.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Yeah. So the idea is that if I have in that case, preparations corresponding to distinct quantum states can't have any overlap in their so the screening off is that once so if two preparations can result in the same ontic state, then conditional on that ontic state, it doesn't matter which preparation I do. And that is true of the de Broglie-Bohm theory. Right. So, if you take the ontic state to be just the particle positions, then of course it doesn't work. But that's wrong. The ontic state is a complete specification of the physical state. And I do believe that the Bohmian mechanics, as the way that Dourdent, Goldstein, and Zangi, et cetera, think of it, is a quantum state realist theory in the sense that I'm talking about, because when I do a preparation, then there's for the subsystem, there's an effective wave function, and it's a matter of physical fact about which it is, and different preparations could result in different wave functions. So right, and that's a conclusion that different preparations with which you associate distinct pure quantum states, and here the pure quantum state in question would be the effective wave function of the subsystem, are ontically distinct. And yeah, the assumption is that that's true, right? So there's no reason for a theory like that to evade the theorem, because it satisfies the conclusion of the theorem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt. So yeah, you can keep on discussing if you want for 5 minutes, but we are going to take a 5 minutes break before the next talk. We can all thanks again Wayne for the presentation and the discussion. Give a round of applause.
Thank you.
And yeah, so in 5 minutes we go back with GRW and Untitled.